We are ready to go. Okay, we were speaking about tzaddikim. We're speaking about how the neshama, the nishmas Yisrael, which comes from the moyach of the Av, which comes from the mind of the Father, and that tipa that comes from the mind of the Father creates the entire body of the child. Right? This is just basic biology. How kids are made, not from storks. Like my 9th grade phys ed teacher taught us. This is what happens when the man and the woman and you have a baby. Okay, back to kickball. So we understand that when that tipa comes from the moyach of the Father, it's now creating the child. And what is included inside that tipa? The entire child. Not just the mind of the child, not just the essential limbs of the child. Even the tziparnei raglov, even the toenails of the kid, are all wound and bound up inside the tipa that came from the mind of the Father. Okay? It's all there in that tipa. And the tipa that comes from the mind of the Father is one with the Father. It's the most intimate place where the Father and his thoughts are one, and that is the creation now of the child, and all the limbs of the child are included inside of that tipa. That's in the nimshal that Kaviyachal HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that B'ni B'chayr Yisrael, the Klal Yisrael is my ben, Bonim Atem LaHashem Elokeichem. Oh, it's Hashem Echad. Baruch Hashem. So Klal Yisrael, Bonim Atem LaHashem Elokeichem, that we're like a ben, and taking that all the way, it means that Hashem thought, and so to speak, the tipa from Hashem now created this child, and as the generations are going on, just like a child that's being unwound in the womb of the mother, it's being it's an amazing thing. I know that you could probably see videos of all this stuff. You can, through ultrasound, where you could see the child, week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just literally the formation of the fetus as the child is getting a heartbeat. That's an amazing thing. I think by somewhere between 6 and 9 weeks, there's a heartbeat. You hear a heartbeat. And there are those out in the world that want to say, this is just sick. That there's such a thing, it's called post-birth abortion. That's actually called murder. Because their svara is that there's certain memory faculties that if the baby doesn't have that, then it's like they're not alive. These are things that are being passed in the Senate. It's not like, we're not like in some like third world, Bush tribe here. This is like first world belief systems. And we call that murder. And the Torah has always held human life in the greatest regard, the highest level. So there's life. I don't mean that there's never cases where there could be before 40 days. Those are all separate discussions that need to be spoken about in detail on a very case-by-case basis by very competent tzaddikim who can speak it out with the couple. But b'derech klal, we're always into life. We're totally pro-life. Everything's about life. Chayim, chiyas, life. Being into life. Ki hem chayenu, atem adveikim b'Hashem Elokeichem, chayim, kulchem hayoyim. Everything is about life. Divrei Elokim chayim, we're about life. So even the whole creation, just think, it's a very deep thing. Even the whole creation of the godly soul is through an analogy of giving life. God is inseminating, is giving a life. It's so deep. It's so touching in a real way. God is creating the godly soul through this act, in our analogy of like a husband and wife creating life. Everything is about life, pro-life. Now we can understand how you have different types of neshamas, like we understand like Moshe Rabbeinu, and even the neshamas of very simple people, because those are like the different limbs of the body. And just like the different limbs of the body have different amount of life force coursing through them, but they all get their life force from the moyach of the ben. They all get their life force, just like any of us. All of the life force of our body comes from our brain. That's what's sending out energy to all areas of the body. So too in Nishmas Yisrael, to the degree that we're connected to the brain, we're going to be feeling life force. And ultimately, what's that life force? That's the life force of the mind of the Father, which is Hashem. So that took us into the connection to tzaddikim. Okay? Ubezeh, the last line. Excuse me, 3 lines up. Ki yinikas v'chiyas nefesh ruach neshama shel amei haaretz. Because the yinika, the drawing down of the life force, page 12, 2 lines from the bottom now. The yinika, the drawing forth down of that life force of the amei haaretz, even simple people, who min nefesh ruach neshama shel tzadikim, ve'achachamim, Rasha b'nei Yisrael shebedayram. On each level, the toenails are receiving their life force from the nefesh ruach neshama of the tzadikim, which is the mind. So the life force is coursing through the entire system to the degree that a person is connected to the tzaddikim. Whether they know it or not, that's where the life force is coming from. If the toe says, I don't like my brain, does he still get energy from the brain? Yeah, it's just the reality. The reality of the system is Hashem put tzaddikim into the world for a very specific reason. So there should be a brain to the body. It's important to internalize that. And that's why you see in all of Hasidic thought, there was a major emphasis to bring back the connection to tzaddikim. By the way, the Baal Shem didn't introduce something new. Read the Piyas Tzedek the Rebbe at the beginning of Hachsharas Avreichem. It's very, very clear that what the Baal Shem Tov, what all of us are here doing, is not a new path, but rather we're bringing back the schools of prophecy that always existed. That's what this is all about. Now, I don't want anybody all of a sudden saying, the Lord, I heard the Lord! Because then we'll have to talk privately afterwards. Even though you could, so to speak, do that just for fun. And if you will start to get more God conscious feeling coursing through you, but no, doesn't mean that there's like voices all of a sudden. Prophecy has many, many layers, like we were talking about in the Dveikus class. Many, 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 the highest of which is prophecy. But the Baal Shem Tov was here to bring that back. And one of the main renaissances that was brought back was this connection to tzaddikim. Okay? And the Baal Tanya was such a godly in both Nigla and Nister, in the revealed part of Torah and also Kabbalah. He always weaves in halacha, and he always weaves in how to now understand Gemara is based on Kabbalah. So look, he's going to understand his Gemara brilliantly. Ubezei, when you hear that, Ubezei, with this we can now understand something in Kabbalah and something in the Gemara, but on a much deeper level. Ubezei yuvan maimer Chazal. Now we can understand what Chazal said. Rabbi Sein Zechoin Livrocha al Poskul Adovka Boy. Dveikus. The Torah says you should have Dveikus in Hashem. You should cleave. You should be intimately bound to God. There's only one problem, the Gemara says. God is an all-consuming fire. Remember we said? It's like going to the face of the sun. God is infinite light. How would you enjoy that experience? You would just be consumed in it. So the Gemara's question is, how do you do that? The Torah says, have deep bonded intimacy with God. The Gemara is like, you'll be consumed. There'll be no more of you. So what does the Gemara answer? Shekol hadavuk betalmidei chachamim. The Gemara says, really? Anybody who connects to the tzaddikim, malalav akosev. It's like ki'ilu nidba b'shchina mamish. The Gemara Kesubos, Kufiyad Aleph Amid Beis. It's like he's mamish being davuk in the shchina, like he is being davuk in the divine presence. So let's speak that out. How do you understand that? Because when you connect to the Talmid Chacham, which we said is the mind of the child, it's like the toenail saying that I want a relationship. I want the energy to be coursing into me through my mind, which are Kshuas Neves Ruach Neshama Shel Amei Haaretz. Because when you connect to the Talmid Chacham, then the nefesh, ruach, and neshama of you, even though you're in the foot, you're now directly in alignment with the entire system. And all the energy is going to flow right to you. And of course, where does the energy of the mind of the child come from? Directly from the mind of the father. And the mind of the father is Hashem. And Hashem and his thoughts are one. Mamish one. So a person that's Davik and the tzaddik is the mind of the son. So now he's filled with this energy. But what is that energy? The energy is the mind of the Father, from whence he came, which is undiluted godness. That's what our soul is made of. Bless you. And the ultimate connection to that is to the tzaddikim. And this soul is inside of us no matter what. So you might say, but what about the people who, God forbid, fight against tzaddikim? Over the generations have rejected the rabbis. So that's not good. And look what it says. And when you connect to the mind, just speaking it out, when you connect to the mind of the Father, that's Chachma Ilah. That's called God's upper wisdom. That's called Chachma Da'atzilus. Because in that place, God and his Chachma is one. Like we spoke about earlier in the last chapter. Hashem and knowledge and the ability to know and the creation, it's all one thing. And that place. Of course, God is one beyond that. Because God's oneness can't be spoken about as him and his oneness, in his essence. That's why, by the way, this isn't that Hagah. This Hagah over here, you see the little letters here? All the straight Kabbalah parts. What he says there is, how can the Rambam agree with the Arizal? The Arizal says God's essence, you can't even say that it's God and his wisdom. That implies that there's God and wisdom. Even the words are, God and his wisdom are one. You can't say that. There can't be God and. Even if it's his wisdom are one. How do you say such a thing? So maybe you might suggest that the Rambam did not go with the Kabbalah of the Ari. So the answer is no. The Rambam also agrees and is in line with the Kabbalah of the Ari. Because the Ari, when he talked about that you can't talk about God in his essence like that, he meant above Chachma Datzilus. Oh, very good. Above Chachma Datzilus in the worlds of Ein Sof, you can't say God in his Chachma. That's Mamish Echad. You can't talk about God in anything. The Rambam was talking about the worlds lower than Ein Sof, where it begins Chachma Ilah, Chachma Datzilus, and in that world, that's the first place that you could say that God and his Chachma are one. Because that's the first place that you have Oiris and Kalim. Of course. But the Kalim in that world are made out of ore. It's ore going into Kalim of ore. So in that place, the Kalim and the ore is all one thing. So there you could say that it's Chachma, Chachmasai, and who is one. Because it's Kalim in ore. So that's what the Rambam's pshat was. Yichab? Okay, great. Moving on. That's the pshat. Okay? So that, when a person goes to that place, he's touching the highest place of oneness with God. Where you can actually say that God and his wisdom are one. That's the highest place that we go to. Beyond that, it's like, it's just unity, mamish. Okay, this bracket part is scary. And it's in brackets because some editions didn't have it. But Poishim v'Morim v'Tamid Chachamim, and those that rebel. Not that part. Every edition had that. The end of the chapter, some editions didn't have. I.e. that it was only added later. i.e., like in the time of the Baal Tanya, but in just later printings from the Baal Tanya. Everything here is from the Baal Tanya, you know that. Everything here is, he would fast for a week to put a vav or not a vav. This is like Torah Birsav, so to speak. That's why they say that there should be no nakudas. That's why there has a tzur sadat, like it. And all the rest of the Sifrei Hasidus is like Torah Baal Peh. Yeah, there's such a Messiah like that in Chabad. See, it's like learning the Chumash. That's why there's how many books in Tanya? That's right, 5. How many chapters in Tanya? That's right, 53. Same as the Chumash. This is like how many days was the Baal Tanya incarcerated in jail and he came out of Yutes Kislev? We're getting ready for the Chag. It's already Shloshim Yom Kedem Chag. 53 days. Every day corresponds to one chapter in the Tanya. It's a whole thing. It's a whole system in Chabad. So you're welcome to this world. Okay, so what about the Poshim, the Mordim, and Tamim, and Chachamim? The people that are, God forbid, rebel against the rabbis. So it's like the toenail saying, I don't want any connection to my brain, which is such a foolish position to take. Why would you do such a thing? It's like a spiritual suicide. So where do they get their energy and life force from? Are they cut off? The answer is no. They're not cut off, but they get a very downgraded version of life. Yenikas nefesh ruach and neshama shalahem, their life force, even their nefesh, even their physical connection, their ruach, their ambition, their neshama, their intellect, mibechinas acharayim, it comes from the backside of nefesh ruach and neshama tamid chacham. Comes from the backside. You might say, what does that mean, the backside? Look at Perek Chaf Beis, chapter 22. Go to chapter 22 in your Tanya. It's on page 54. 8 lines down. 2 words in it says, Perish Acharayim. What does it mean, Acharayim? What is this idea of the backside? So Acharayim means like somebody who gives something. He's feeding, he's giving something to his enemy. But he doesn't want to give him. He's forced through some reason or circumstance that he's got to feed him. Usually I think about this as like some horrible murderer that God, just some sicko that he needs to be taken to trial. So they keep him alive because they want to take him and have justice be served. So a horrible, like maniac and rapist, Hashem Yirachem. The sick people. So how do you think when they give him the food, they give it to him? Do you think they give it with a nice smile? They warm it up just right in a sous vide. It's just cooked through perfectly. And they give it with like a lot of love? Or do they throw it over their shoulder, acharayim, and just take this bone, just chew on this scum? Shemashlicha like klachar kaspoy. Acharayim means you threw it over your back, you like threw it behind you. So kaspoy is like over your shoulder. Ki machzir panam mimenu misin asay. He turns his face away. I hate this person. I have to give this. There's a reason, but I'm giving without interest. Now, by the way, that could also be it doesn't have to be that intense, but also somebody's talking to you and they're answering the questions, but they're, so to speak, not interested in talking to you right now because their mind is in their pocket on the device that's been buzzing for the last 30 seconds while you actually wanted to ask them something. That's also called acharayim. They've turned away. They're not interested in you. Acharayim is always giving, but not with your excitement. What's the opposite of acharayim? Panim. Giving with the face, a warm face. That's why we always ask Hashem, Ki be'or panecha. We want your face. Yo'er Hashem panav elecha. When the Kohanim give the bracha, Yo'er Hashem panav, we're not just saying like that God should turn towards us His face. We're saying that God should give us in a way of love. That it should be with tremendous love. And that we towards our spouses, when they ask us to do something, like, Charlie, take out the garbage. Nah, okay, fine. Nah. And then the guy does like huffing and puffing. That's also called acharayim, like I did it. I did it. That's all acharayim, to live a life like that, as opposed to the mom says something like, can you please? It's like, yes, mom. She's probably like, are you okay? Something wrong? Or what do you want? So, that's acharayim. So God, if a person turns away from tzaddikim, what does it mean? God will nourish them through the backside of the tzaddikim. They're going to get life force, but it's going to be so downgraded. Okay? Umashke. We're going to have to do this part next time. Umashkos b'zoyer. This is the part that some of the additions that only was added later. And this that it says in the Zohar, I'll tell you which page, but then you'll probably look it up, so don't do that. Ubezorcha, okay. Gimel, Mem Tes on base. Ubezorcha Chodosh, Yud Aleph Amid Aleph. Sha'ikr talui, that the main thing, says the Zohar, she'talui she'yakadish atzim b'shas tashmish. Dafka. That the Zohar says in a number of places that a husband and wife had to be very, very careful to have holy thoughts during intimacy. Why? Because they're drawing a lavush for their child. They're drawing part of the soul. They're not drawing the godly soul. That's given right from God. And God could give that a very, very holy soul to a very lowly person, like we saw by Avram Avinu. And can also give lowly souls to holy people. Like we saw by Avram Avinu. Ishmael, Esav, right? He can give lower souls to holy people. Yitzchak had an Esav. Yitzchak had an Esav. Dafka. So what is the parent giving? It's a form of the animal soul. It's the outer coating of the animal soul that allows for communication between the godly soul and the animal soul. In essence, they're giving the sensitivity and the proclivity of this child to be able to be excited for mitzvahs, or them to be kind of coarse human beings, that they'll have to overcome that coarseness and allow their godly soul to shine through. And therefore, what the Zohar is talking about is the parents should be very careful, because you never want to set your kids up with difficulty. But Avram Avinu is the biggest proof that no matter who your parents are, you could become Avram Avinu. You could start the entire Jewish people. Be the father of humanity. His father was not exactly a holy dude. So, Avram Avinu had to overcome struggles, because his father was not thinking holy thoughts at that moment. But that's the biggest chizuk, and all this far I'm talking about this, all this far. That we were begun as a child of Terach. A Ben Terach became the greatest human being of all time. It's geschmack, right? It's geschmack. That means nothing matters. But what the Zohar means is now, kan lahaba, going forward, a parent should do anything possible, because he wants his kids to be spiritually sensitive to Kedusha, especially in our generation. There's so much garbage out there. But he wants the kids to have a good shot, that when they hear Divrei Torah like that, yes, I want that. That's what's given from the parents. Masha'en came B'nai Ami Haaretz, which is not the case when it comes to B'nai Ami Haaretz. Hainu Mishum, why? Because they're just thinking about just animalistic pleasures. So they're not thinking about holy things. Mishum she'ein lecha nefesh ruach neshama she'ein la lavush min nefesh ta'atzmus av ve'imoy. Because the child gets a lavush, like I mentioned, this coating on top of the animal soul that comes from the parents. The kol ha-mitzvahs she'oiseh, and the mitzvahs that the kid does. Ha-kol ali de'oiseh lavush. This is like the spiritual interface, like we mentioned, where the divine soul, the godly soul, can communicate with the animal soul and get the animal soul, your body, to make moves in this world. A lot of times the person he's like, Pringles and Netflix. But the godly soul doesn't want you. He's trying to talk to him, like, snap out of it. That's from the parent. Va'afilu ha'shefesh ha'noistim le'min ha'shamayim, even all this bracha that comes. Hakol ali levush zeh comes from that levush. Ve'im yekadish es atzmai yimshach levush kodesh l'nishmas b'nai. And if a person mekadesh himself, he gives a holy levush to his kids. Va'afuli hi neshama gedola, and even a holy soul like Avram Avinu, sricha lekiddush avid would have needed that. because otherwise you get a holy soul, but it's still hard for him. But the soul itself, a super holy neshama, you can have a mamish holy neshama that comes in the world of Terah. Which means it doesn't matter where you come, doesn't matter. The soul that that's from God. The lavush, okay, is it going to be a fancy Gucci situation, or is it going to be soiled clothing? That the parent has to do the best they can. This is all found from the Arizal. Obviously, this is like Arizal type topics. The calls that L'Kutei Torah, Utami Mitzvahs, Parash Bereishis, Ad Kan Perak Beis. Have a wonderful day. Call to.